Not having that. We also brought in work casual. Do you guys remember that? Well, some of you may, but Gen X was really responsible for bringing in work casual. Authority. Unimpressed. Unimpressed. Why would we be? Why would we be? Very few authority figures kind of stood up for us or were there for us on a consistent basis. So you take Gen X, who's very respectful of authority and loves authority themselves, and then you bring in a whole workforce behind them who are like, I don't care if you're my boss. You're only my boss because you've been here longer. Huge tensions in the workforce. Huge tensions in the workforce. They lead by competence. So you might see this in your work right now. Like, I don't understand why this person is doing that. They've never done that job. They've just been in the company long enough that they got that job. The Gen X looks and says, put somebody who can lead in there. Put somebody who can actually do the job. Complete shift from, boomers don't think that way. They don't think that way. They're reluctant to commit, but Gen X, the nice thing with Gen X, once we commit, we're pretty much in for the whole hog, right? And we see a declining divorce rate, significantly declining divorce rate among Gen X. Okay, so we're getting married later, but we're staying there at a greater rate. Our biggest turnoffs, hype and cliche. We kind of don't buy it, but it makes sense when you think about the environment we grew up in. Right? And their biggest thing is immediate feedback. How many of you do annual reviews at work? Yeah, with Gen X, you have to do a lot. If you manage Gen X, or you have to give them more immediate feedback, because there's nothing worse than going into a review and you're like, wow, you've thought about this the whole year and you haven't said anything to me? Great. Because Gen X, now this is typically how Gen X works. Give them work, they'll go off and they'll get it done. Okay, leave me alone and let me do my job. Right? I can do this, let me do it, I'll ask for help if I need it, but I'm going to move away, I'm going to go and do my job. Completely different than millennials, by the way. Completely different than millennials. But Gen X are kind of a leave us alone. But the nice thing is, the University of Michigan has a long-term study going on with Gen X, and we're actually very happy and well-adjusted, despite the very difficult circumstances for which we came of age. And what's interesting in there is almost half of us, actually 48% of Gen X has advanced degrees. And that wasn't just because the economy was bad and we all went back to grad school. It was that we perceive higher degrees as providing us with potentially more stable jobs or more options should our career be changing. Make sense? Makes sense there. Okay. From a social don't go yet. From a social media perspective, you think millennials do everything online, but Gen X is actually one of the heaviest users of social media outside of YouTube. But we're one of the heaviest users both on Twitter and of Facebook for connecting. Facebook makes sense, right? We're connecting with our peers. Right? I don't really want to friend my parent, but I guess I'll do it. But they'll friend and connect with peers as a matter of validation for who they are, from a generational perspective. How am I doing on time, Ike or Stacy?
12:45.
12:45. Okay. All right, wrapping it up. Okay. Millennials. Okay. So boomers really messed up with Gen X. Okay. Their kids got out and like, holy crap, we really messed it up. So when millennials came about, let's go ahead and look at that. Let's first say millennials right now are 1980 to 1999. I'm only going to be talking about 18 and up, okay? I think it's kind of risky to go with some of the younger information. But they're currently 12 to 31. They are, go ahead and advance that. They're the largest generation in history. There's more than 100 million of them. 100 million. So baby boomers got busy after they messed up with Gen X, but they produced 100 million children. Their parents are mostly very early Xers and very late boomers, but they're an absolutely massive generation. They're a third of this country. A third of this country is younger than the age of 31. It's kind of mind-boggling, to think about. We would call them as a generation, so we have the forgotten generation, but millennials actually are more like their grandparents than their parents. So they're traditional, but with a modern twist. Okay, so everything kind of has a modern bent to it. Okay, we've got the largest generation here. They're born into high-tech and neo-optimistic times. I mean, this, I want you to think of 1980. So we had Reagan moving into, Bush Sr., a little bit of a downturn there, and then Clinton, which was, of course, a very prosperous time for America. They're the most diverse generation. 1 in 3 is not white. Huge shift, from a demographic perspective, a huge shift. 1 in 3 is actually not white. They're the most educated, Head Start, pre-K, right? Because these kids were going to be special, okay? Unlike Gen X, we were going to make these kids very, very special. So we're going to educate them. But it was also this push from, wow, we're losing out to Asian competition. We better start our kids sooner so that they'll achieve. All right. They're the most medicated generation. This is where it starts to get a little bit controversial. If you have parents that say, I'm okay, you're okay, and there's a norm of that, and suddenly I have a rambunctious 5-year-old little boy. How many of you have little boys? Like, or have boys as kids? Yeah. I mean, a hyper 5-year-old, whoa, right? That needs to be medicated. I think he has ADD. I think he has ADHD. And it became all of a sudden a pharmaceutical solution to bring us into a normalized perspective. Now, there are very real cases, caveat here, of ADD and ADHD, but it really should only be a prescription rate of about 8%. Anybody want to know what guess what the prescription rate is for children under 18 right now?
32%.
Are you Googling?
No.
That's not fair. It's 32%. That's so not fair. Damn, Ike. All right. But it's 32%. And we know from, like, everyone really good in statistics here, it really should be about between 8 to 10%. But we're medicating 1/3 of them to say, we're going to help you with anxiety. We're going to help you with, we're going to help you with, into this norm of I'm okay, you're okay. Well, you're not getting sleep. Well, let's get you some sleep medicine. And we were giving children very powerful drugs. I mean, these are where's my brain scientist? There you go. We're giving these children very powerful mind-altering drugs to medicate them into norms with no real long-term understanding of exactly what that does. But what does it also say? If you've had a bad day or if you're feeling out of sorts, there's a medical response. There's a pharmaceutical response to that. That's a big challenge because as they get older and you face more of life's ups and downs, what's going to happen? And we see higher rates of depression, not quite as high as senior citizens, but we see higher rates of depression in millennial generation. They're the most cared for generation, okay? These are kids that, got cars for their birthday. Almost 70% of them have a credit card before they were at age 18. Easy. A credit card for an 18-year-old? We want to take care of it. They're the most marketed to generation ever. So we've suddenly went from, programming, which was Saturday morning cartoons, which was my generation, to 24-hour programming where I could insert into, Chuck E. Cheese, right? The Chuck E. Cheese ads. And they're already, they started putting the sugary cereals on the lower shelves. Yeah, it didn't used to be that way. They've been marketed to from a very young age. And they're the most sexualized generation. When we talk about Bill Clinton, as great of a president as he was, he really redefined the sexual experience. Anyone want to disagree with me on that one? Why? Because kids, all of a sudden, we got a little bit of wiggle room, and we could say, well, is oral sex really sex? Well, according to the President of the United States, and now, okay, all right. But they're the most sexualized, not just from a definition, but if you look at music, if you look at this rise of entertainment culture, this really deep rise in entertainment culture, you especially see the sexualization of girls from a very young age that we didn't have before. And all you have to do, YouTube videos on provocative cheerleader dances for 10-year-olds. Okay, they're out there, and there's people like freaking on a basketball gymnasium floor at 10, and we're not thinking anything's weird with that. But they're the most sexualized generation that we've had. They also grew up post-AIDS, okay, where the conversation of condoms is as natural to them. For Gen X, we had to sit through awkward conversations with parents and teachers. But for them, it's pretty much an expected, it wasn't unusual for them to have sexual conversations. They understand violence in a personal way. Unlike when Ike and I went to school, we're 5 minutes, okay. Unlike when Ike and I went to school, right, where someone might pull a gun, there might be a fight, or someone might pull a knife, there might be a gun off campus, but Columbine completely shifted that. All of a sudden, someone could bring semi-automatic weapons and a bomb to school. I was a military kid, I never had to go through a metal detector to go to school. Never had to. Millennials, that's part of their norm. They're the most technologically adept workers. They're very fast learners. They're incredibly impatient. Really? Anyone surprised? I have millennials who work for me, and they will send me a text, and then they'll send me another text asking if I got that text. Okay, they won't pick up the phone, right? but they'll send me another text to make sure I got it, and it's like, okay, I need like 30 seconds to respond. And I think we're all becoming more impatient. But this is a generation where their social connections, where their personal validation comes a lot from online interaction. So you think about, 70% of what we communicate, right, is about with our body language. When you remove that and you only have text-based or even, text-based conversations, and suddenly we're having whole relationships online, validation, cut downs, bullying, whatever you want to say, but this whole trend of my personal identification is so wrapped up in, this is a good example. More than 80% of millennials will sleep with their phone by the bed, turned on. And has everyone seen that statistic? Well, how many will actually look at something during sex? Have you guys heard this? It's like 60% of them will actually. It's clearly, they're not doing it right, but, but the phone, their digital connection, their connection to their online world is that strong. Yeah, they have a lot to learn. I mean, but they, it's clearly that strong that the phone, the mobile phone is just, mobile technology has made their online, that's part of my world. In fact, the information that came out from Cisco, this is kind of interesting, is that 1/3 of millennials said it's as important as food, water, and air. The internet is as important as food, water, and air. But that's how much it means to this generation. So they also have lower boundaries around personal information, right? Because my work life and my personal life kind of blend together. Go ahead and go to the next one. They're a very hopeful generation, which is nice to see, but they have a lot, that's also part of the youth, but from an outlook, they're very hopeful. Their work ethic, they're very determined that their work will matter and have meaning. Okay, even if they're stapling papers, they want to know why. Okay, and they're very polite to authority, but they're going to snicker and post something about you on Facebook later. All right, and actually the #1 social network for this generation is not Facebook. Anybody want to guess what it is? YouTube. YouTube is the #1 social site for millennials, without a doubt. And they lead by pulling together. So from a consensus perspective, these are kids that were group project for like their entire lives. So for them to lead, to pull together, it doesn't matter if I get credit so much, which is very different from boomers. It's a matter of let's all get along. Let's all create a consensus. They're very inclusive. So in boomers, they're that way too. But they're not inclusive to a fault where they would not say, you know what, I disagree with you, or I don't think that's right. Whereas boomers have a real difficult time with that thing. Biggest turnoff is waiting. Really, are we surprised? But from a work perspective, you have to provide structure. So unlike Gen X, right, you can give them an assignment, they're going to go off. Millennials, you kind of have to say, this is the deadline, this is where you're going to go, this is. You have to give them a lot of structure. And why is that? Because these are the kids that we didn't keep score in a baseball game, right? There are no losers. You're a winner, you played. You're so special and unique. You can be anything you want to be. I can't be a defensive coordinator for Alabama, right? Or I guess I should say Penn State. There might be a job opening there. But, oops, I said it out loud. But, okay, so we didn't keep score. And then we went away from grades with this generation, right? There are no failing grades, right? We're going to do needs improvement at age appropriate or excelling, right? We completely shifted and changed. We wanted to protect millennials from anything negative. So even in a workspace, they needed a lot of feedback. Why? Because we never kept score. Or we rarely kept score for them. There are no winners and losers, right? Everybody's going to get a medal. That's not how life really works. But from a social perspective, 98% of them are online. YouTube is the #1 place that they go to from a social networking site. It also makes sense because their parents are getting on Facebook, and when parents show up, kids walk out the door, right? Exactly, so we don't know where, but right now YouTube is the #1 place that they go. Let's go to that next one. All right, so takeaways, real quick, and then if we have time, we'll do some questions here. But you want to think about how, again, I feel, I was only, in 50 minutes, I'm able to give you kind of the surface of this, but there's a lot of depth to generational research. And while it feels like broad strokes, believe it or not, we're highly predictable, as human beings, but when we put our generational lens on, even though, good example, my parents are still married, I come from a military family, but I identify with Gen X pretty much hook, line, sinker, which even shocks even me, even as I say that out loud. But it really fits. So look at the target audience, look at your team, look at your own family, and kind of look at people from their generational affiliation, and all of a sudden it makes sense. Okay, all of a sudden it makes sense. Create an age-based profile. You want to align any strategy that you're doing with exactly what we're trying to achieve. So if your whole target, to get donors, and you're trying to reach boomers, think about how you're addressing them, right? Think about how to make it inclusive. Talk about keeping up with the Joneses. Like, well, did you know, Sean right here gave $50. Are you going to give $50? Of course not. You keep up with the Joneses, right? Compare them to their peers, right? But with civics, help them feel included, right? Help them feel like it's a legacy and it matters more than that. And most importantly, you want to apply potentially what you got today, hopefully you got something, as a way to create and navigate exactly what you're doing. Hopefully understand yourselves a little bit better, and just to think about how that makes a difference and how when we come together like as a team or as a work environment, people are bringing that lens with them even when they don't realize it. So I'm going to turn it over to questions. Do we have time?
One question.
Okay, one question.
I got one.
Okay, Ike.
Given that we are not as homogenous a culture as we once were, and that people are waiting later in their marriages to have children, and you have a lot of children that are now being raised by grandparents.
Yes.
Are we going to start to see some type of shift in the way these generational lenses are framed, so that it's not so much about birth date, but about where you are in your life with regards to raising of children, what kind of relationships you have? Okay,
did everyone hear his question? So as we become less homogenous, more diverse as a country, and as we have different familial situations, so you have grandparents raising grandkids or different segments, are we going to see where your date stamp of your birth will matter less than what your family situation is? And the answer is no. We're shaped by not only by our family structure, by the events around us, the larger, broader culture. So for example, boomers were dramatically impacted by the Vietnam War, the assassination of JFK, of Martin Luther King, of civil rights, and of women entering the workforce. That was broader than their families. Okay. Gen X was severely affected, of course, by the family relation, but also the downsizing of the economy. All right, that complete shift into we're going to compare them to everyone out there. And then with millennials, and we're still shaping and seeing, but they came about at a time of, and we're still getting this rapid, so we were the internet generation, millennials are kind of social generation. So we're shaped so broadly, so specifically by our families, but so broadly by the culture around us. So I would say, and the folks who do the most generational research over at Pew would say that it still is going to matter more the time and date stamp you were born, because it's those mass events around us. 9/11, will be a huge shapeshifter for older millennials. So it's a good question though. But interestingly enough, we have more boomers are raising more children, second children, and grandkids than any other generation before. So makes sense. Thank you all so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.